And we are live. Welcome to this week's episode of the Funvee Tailgate podcast presented by ThunderblogSports.com, a part of the Bullpen Cart podcast feed, making its grand return after a week off. Thanksgiving was a little too good to myself and my partner, Matty D. What's up, buddy?
You are correct, by the way. It was a great week last week. I need an elastic suit band, if you will. I think
I'm finally getting back to my old belt rung.
Right, there you go. I like that. Nice. Yeah, well, okay. Well, slowly.
Belt notch, whatever it is.
I'm with you. But it was also a great week of football. Really like kind of an all-week thing last week. Both weekends. A lot of stuff happened, if you will. Some stuff that we don't like, but we'll get to that.
Yeah.
But it was a really good week. And finally, we're there, man. We're at the finish line for college football, if you will, in terms of getting everything set, and it's gonna be wild. It's gonna be absolutely wild.
So this week is college championship weekend. All conference championships being played now with the Big 12 having a championship for the second year. We don't have a full Big 12 slate, just the championship game. So we really are right at the end of it. And then we get, I think, a couple weeks before the first slate of bowl games starts, but a month until, the playoff starts. So really, the last big hurrah, last big slate to talk about for college. And it's going to be a ton of fun. We got some rematches of great regular season games. We get some pretty solid games all around. We get the obviously 1 versus 4, and we'll talk about the new rankings pretty soon, but it's going to be a ton of fun. Yeah,
no, absolutely. And, there's been a lot of talk about whether conference championship games should matter. Do they matter? They matter.
Oh, yeah.
And this is as big a weekend as you're going to get. Some rematches. By the way, did you know it's the first rematch between two teams since I think it's like 115 years? That makes sense?
Texas, Oklahoma?
Yeah, first time they've played a rematch in the same year in 115 years.
That makes sense.
It does, but it's still, to me, it's just absolutely wild. I'm ready though, and I'm also ready. Yeah, I mean, it's hard for a lot of reasons. For one, well, not one. It's really one reason why it's hard, but I am really excited though. Cannot wait.
Yeah, so before we jump into this weekend's slate, let's talk about last weekend's slate and the new rankings that came from it. Obviously, the big news that Matt keeps alluding to is that the Michigan Wolverines fell to Ohio State. But even the day before that, we saw a lot of pictures get a lot clearer. One being Oklahoma taking down West Virginia in one of the most ridiculous college football games I have ever watched, and that includes the Monday night game we had a week and a half ago, even though that's pro. But football games, I'll edit myself. Washington State ended up being pretty nuts. That really cleared up and put to bed the Pac-12. And UCF completed their undefeated regular season at the cost of their quarterback. So we got some interest there. Texas would have been more interesting if they were not a 3-loss team, but they were scared by Kansas a little bit. But overall, the entire weekend, Matt, ended up being a ton of fun. Friday though, really, I think was the dust settler before we got to Michigan, Ohio State. That ended up being that and USC Notre Dame, the two kind of win and you're effectively in games.
Right. Absolutely. By the way, I want to point out it's a shame that Mackenzie Milton had the injury happen to him.
The UCF quarterback he's talking about.
UCF quarterback, excuse me. Dark horse Heisman candidate, really, really good player. They're all the way up to 8th. And in theory, a couple losses. I mean, it's pretty outlandish if it were to happen. But a couple teams were to lose, they would be maybe knocking on the door. Although we'll get there. I still don't think they even have a way in, and particularly now, there's definitely going to be some bias.
For that to happen, it would have to be Clemson loses to Pitt, Georgia loses to Alabama, Oklahoma loses to Texas, and Ohio State loses to Northwestern.
Yeah. And by the way, and even then, theoretically, you could see a team leap, right?
Yeah, Michigan's ranked higher than them.
Michigan's right there. You could see a Texas fly all the way up the rankings, which I doubt, but I still think it would be pretty difficult. But you know what? They're all the way up to 8th. Yeah, but anyway, you were correct with Notre Dame. I had a little concern going into that USC game because USC it's at USC. They're still a big time program.
Yeah, you never know with a road game.
Right.
You never know with a road game.
It was 24-17. It was a great game. The USC, well, it was really 24-10. USC scored really late, but it was a better game than it probably should have been. But the Irish did what they had to do, and they just win. They just win, right? That's all that matters. Just win, right?
That's all that mattered. And now I really think unless there's some huge statement by, like, if Georgia wins and then there's a huge statement by Oklahoma or Ohio State in their championship games, that's the only way in my mind that Notre Dame doesn't get in. But I think you'd really see a lot of critics of the college football playoff rankings.
Yeah.
Really come with their pitchforks and torches to expand this to at least 6, if that were the case.
Yeah, definitely. Other than that, well, by the way, we got to talk about one other game that happened. It might have been one of the greatest college football games ever. Texas A&M, LSU.
Oh, yeah. How were we feeling in this game?
7 overtimes.
7 overtimes.
Yeah, so you can actually catch it if you have, there's a couple of ESPN networks keep replaying it over and over again.
Well, the game's they probably started airing it on Sunday, and it's still going.
Right. It is wild, the game. Some incredible plays and catches. And by the way, if you didn't know, starting in the 3rd overtime, you have to go for 2. This team kept going for 2. They kept getting it. I mean, it was an absolutely ridiculous game. Texas A&M won at home. What is a disappointing loss for LSU. They scored, by the way, Texas A&M scored 43 points in overtime. LSU scored 41.
Yes, it was 31-31 at the end of the regulation.
Yep. An incredible game. For LSU, they were probably out anyway for the playoffs, but it does officially put a fork in them. It's a tough loss, but it is what it is. It's actually hard to watch, even the game replay, because they speed it up during game replays. It's still a long game to watch. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Everybody else took care of business except for really one. Well, by the way, Pitt got smoked again.
Yeah, that's kind of the shitty thing is Northwestern, at least, did they lose as well? Northwestern? I know they moved down the ranking.
No, they didn't. They sweeped one out against Illinois.
Okay. Yeah, but that's the shitty thing is Pitt loses. So now they're not even ranked playing Clemson, and they're a 4-touchdown dog. I mean, we've seen this a lot with the ACC championship. I remember it was the year that Florida State ended up beating Auburn in the last BCS title game. They played Duke in the ACC championship game. We get these championship games that end up being kind of and real. Watch where you're going. I mean, really don't fuck this thing up. Kind of attitudes towards the game. Not that that's a terrible thing. I know the ACC does their divisions a little different than just directional. They do Atlantic and Coastal, which kind of is directional. There's some northern teams that are up there, but a lot of it's grouped for rivalries and purposes of that. But it's one of those things where it's just tough. I mean, thankfully the SEC doesn't have the SEC East problem. Georgia at least took care of business enough to get there.
Yeah. But here's what I would say though. I mean, it's hard to say that division. I mean, when you look at the Coastal, right? The Hurricanes are supposed to be a great program, and they're struggling a little bit. Sure. Virginia Tech is supposed to be a really good program, and they're struggling a little bit. So those are your two, I guess you could say, quote unquote, blue bloods in that conference that are not performing. And the other conference, Atlantic, is a little bit more loaded right now, but these things ebb and flow. I do think that they could move a team, though, down into the Coastal, whether it's NC State, would make sense to me because it gives them that natural rivalry with UNC. I don't know, something like that maybe. I just think that's a lot of power in the Atlantic.
Yeah, and you have to remember, too, when a lot of these divisions were drawn up, they used to, when it was just 12 teams, you'd play the 5 other teams in your division, and you were locked in to play one team from the other division. So NC State was that for UNC, and there was a number of other ones that fit that bill. For instance, if you remember when the leaders and legends were the divisions of the Big Ten, Michigan and Ohio State were in different divisions, but were always locked in to play each other every year.
Right.
Now that that's not the case, it's kind of really gotten lost in the wash. But that's a really good point. You could flip Pitt into the Atlantic and put NC State into the Coastal. I know that's not a huge change, but at least does something there.
Right.
You know, it's kind of crazy, though, that Florida State and Miami are in two different divisions when they're both so far down south. And it makes the Atlantic span from Boston to Tallahassee, whereas the Coastal only quote unquote, expands from Pittsburgh to Miami.
Yeah.
You know, it's tough that way, but I don't know. It is something to think about, especially when it is, you know, Pitt's not on a coast. It's not even close to Lake Erie.
No, also, I guess I'm becoming a bigger fan of the way the Big 12 does it. Because the two best teams beat. I mean, I don't know. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. You know, it'd be tough for, like, in the Big 10. That'd be tough because a lot of times you get Michigan, Ohio State one week, and the next week you get them again, right? So that would kind of make it difficult, you know, with the way the rivalry games are set up. But I just think it makes a lot of sense to me in that regard because, you know, you don't have some random team now in these conference championship games. Although
that's a really good point because, you know, you'd have something, say the Big Ten was actually 10 teams and not 14, you'd be able to do what the Big 12 does. And that's the issue that you have at hand is that I guess you do it anywhere that you don't always play every team in the conference.
Yeah.
But it does at least put some opportunity of either rematches or of, you know, good teams playing each other. For instance, you know, if the, you know, and then you don't have that Big Ten West problem that we've had with the Big Ten for however many years.
Right.
And you don't have the SEC East problem that if Georgia doesn't take care of business or Florida doesn't take care of business when Tim Tebow and Urban Meyer were still there. It's an interesting thought. And if that could be implemented, because it seems that when it looked like we were going to have four, instead of having a Power 5, having a Power 4 of like 16 or 18 team conferences. Remember that when we were 5 years ago when we graduated from college and the Big East had just really fallen apart? It seemed like that. And now that really, within a year, it really came to a screeching halt. And I don't know if these teams are just standing pat where they are, what they're thinking about in terms of, do we want to expand? Does Conference USA want to try to, you know, encourage better recruiting? Does the American want to try to encourage better recruiting because they have teams like UCF, like Memphis, like Houston, who, aside from UCF, the other two teams I just mentioned, Temple's in the same boat. They have 4 losses. Cincinnati's 10-2, but you know they didn't play the greatest out of conference schedule. They only played one ranked opponent, that being UCF. So it's interesting to see where they possibly could go and what other conferences might do. And we're in an interesting point where the Final Four now, especially with Notre Dame in it, if Georgia were to beat Alabama, think about this. You have only 2 conferences represented and an independent team.
Yeah. No, yeah.
I'm assuming Alabama stays in. I don't know if I would assume they do what they did last year with a 1-loss Alabama team. And they've certainly proven, as they did against Auburn in a rivalry game, that they can hang around and that they are the best team in the country, even if they don't trend that way coming out of the next week.
Right.
I think they've pretty much locked their way in. Clemson, if they lose, you know, sadly, I think you'd have to throw them out.
I think you would too because they're not losing to Georgia, right?
Yeah,
they're losing to Pitt.
Yeah.
Right. So I think you have to throw them out, right?
You throw them out for, I guess the committee's telling us Oklahoma, which I actually like that they didn't throw Ohio State into 5th, taking Michigan's spot, or even into 4th.
And here's why I agree with that too, because, and by the way, I got to give credit where credit's due. They dominated the Wolverines. It wasn't even close, my friend. It was embarrassing to watch. And quite frankly, if I'm the Michigan brass, I'm walking over to Harbaugh's office and saying, that's almost as unacceptable as you can get. Like, you're like, I don't want to see him fired.
Their 2 biggest losses, a disappointing game against Notre Dame and getting walloped by your biggest rival. And Notre Dame's your second biggest rival, arguably.
But in the Notre Dame game, it was close. It was early in the year. You have the best, arguably the best. You have the best defense in the country, and they get whopped. You have an offense that had been coming on, and they totally struggle. You know, it was unacceptable to me. It's an unacceptable loss, and quite frankly, I would honestly, if I was the Michigan brass, I would tell he doesn't beat Ohio State next year, he's got to go. You can't go 0-4. Is he 0-4 now? I think.
Yeah, he's never beaten him. I think this is his first year is 15, so he's 0-4.
Right. So if he goes 0-5, I don't know how you keep him as head coach. I don't. And look,
that's what Notre Dame did with Charlie Weiss. They gave him 5 years to get things going, and he never really did. So they gave him the boot. And I think that's their general model. Even though Brian Kelly's been there for 7 years now, but if you're not getting things going,
right? Let's say let's hypothetical. Let's say Clemson loses somehow. Okay.
Yeah.
Alabama beats Georgia. Oklahoma, and let's say Ohio State loses. All right. Now you've got Oklahoma and Michigan, who theoretically would jump up into the top 4, right?
Yeah.
I would argue UCF deserves it more than Michigan.
I would
argue Texas might even deserve it more, because none of those teams have lost and given up the amount of points. And I know it was on the road, and I know it got out of hand late. It doesn't matter. It's such an embarrassing loss to me. It's why I like Oklahoma over Ohio State. Oklahoma lost to Texas by a field goal. Ohio State got blown out by Purdue.
Yep.
But the quality of your loss does matter to me.
It absolutely matters, especially when now you're literally splitting hairs. Even if it's Georgia loses, you have this spot open up. You have to split the hairs that way. Because think about it. Ohio State loses to a Purdue team that has lost to a ton of different teams.
Yeah.
And they came in 3 games back in their conference from the team representing their division, Northwestern. And that you have to start then really nitpicking, who beat whom. Ohio State struggled to beat Maryland, who beat Texas, who has beaten Oklahoma, and presumably if Oklahoma then beats Texas on Saturday, they get the revenge story. They beat a team that lost to a team Ohio State struggled to beat.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of transitive property here that really gets, helps out the case of why. And I think you saw it last week with Ohio State staying where they were ranked at 10th, and UCF jumped ahead of them to 9th. And now that UCF's jumped up to 8th, I do like that. I agree with you, though. If, say, Clemson were to lose and Georgia were to lose, there's 2 open spots, and Ohio State loses, I would think UCF gets in.
Right.
Florida?
They could say, they could keep – no, well, this is what LSU's loss really hurts, but Clemson, they might keep in.
You think so? At 12-1?
I wouldn't like that, by the way. I really wouldn't.
I wouldn't like that either. It's such a bad precedent that you can just go.
Right.
You can get to a certain benchmark,
right, and lose to Pitt.
Yeah,
well, that's once
an
again
unranked team, unranked Pitt.
Well, think about this though. Ohio State losing to Purdue, is that worse or better than Clemson losing to Pitt?
Let's just look at it quickly. Pitt's 7-5, 6-2 in the ACC. They have a +1 point differential at 344 points for, 333 points against.
Okay.
Purdue is 6-6 overall, 5-4 in the Big Ten, 383 points for, 327 points against. So they put up more points than this Pitt team has, Purdue.
Okay.
Ohio State, 520 points for, 310 against. So Purdue's defense is 17 points worse in theory.
Okay.
Versus Clemson, who, holy shit, has only let up 168. I would think if Pitt, it depends on how big Pitt either wins by and or how many points they put up. If Pitt were to put up, say, like a 40 burger, or if they put up 50 on this defense, then I think you really have to discredit Clemson a lot more than you have to discredit Ohio State.
Yeah.
At the same, I don't know.
Here's what I was going to say.
Clemson, if you're going Clemson, Ohio State, and you have to split hairs there, that really gets.
Well,
I think it gets.
We talk about when you lose, and how important that is, right? So to me,
certainly.
To me, Clemson losing the last game of the season, it hurts them more than Ohio State losing in the middle of the year to an opponent that, let's just consider Pitt and Purdue at a level playing field.
Sure.
So that's why I could see Ohio State. They don't win their championship game. Clemson doesn't, but Ohio State does. Now all of a sudden, do I think on paper Clemson's a better football team than Ohio State? Yes, because Clemson lost. We're all hypothetical here. But if they lose later, it hurts them more. The only team it doesn't seem to hurt is Alabama, because if Alabama loses, they lose to the 4th team in the nation who's going to go to the playoffs now, right?
Yeah, so, exactly.
Yeah. Kind of a bummer,
I think
by the
Pitt
way.
Losing throws them out, but
yeah. Kind of a bummer that Georgia isn't undefeated, only because it would be cool, because they might be number 2. And it'd be cool to see 1 and 2 go head-to-head. Although, I mean, if that was the case, if that was the case, I would consider the top 4 teams a lock.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I'd make this weekend just – you don't need to watch, don't need to tune in. Go watch Fox's college basketball triple header before the big – whatever. I think the Big Ten Championship's on Saturday night.
Yeah, you're
on
right.
Fox. But they have a triple header of college basketball that they were advertising every single time out during the Michigan-Ohio State game.
By the way, how angry will LSU be? Because they would be 7th at worst. That's what they were before this week, and they might have stayed ahead of Ohio State if a couple upsets occur this weekend, and LSU would have been in position to get in as a 2-loss team.
Yeah, I mean, think about it. Think about if they don't lose last week, or even if they pull out the win against Florida, and then they lose this week to Texas A&M.
Oh my God!
They probably would have lost too late in the season. That's the last taste the committee gets of them. Right. So they probably would have needed to win. Yeah. But if they pull off the win against Florida and they're 11-1, who knows? Yeah. Who knows where that team would be sitting?
By the way, some other interesting teams that have found their way into the rankings. Utah's up to 17th. That's a hell of a program out there. I got to say, hell of a program. Missouri at 24.
Yep.
They're an 8-4 program. A lot of 4-loss teams. 8-4 program, but their losses are to Georgia, Alabama, and Kentucky. They also have a loss at South Carolina by 2 points. A pretty good year for that Missouri program. Excellent quarterback there, as we know, in Drew Lock. I'm pretty impressed with them. And Fresno State jumped back into the rankings after they drubbed San Diego State last weekend. 31-13. By the way, they play at Boise State.
I was about to say that makes it makes that conference championship game a ranked matchup.
Right. And by the way, not only is it ranked, if UCF falters,
they get a New Year's Six bowl.
Right, and they're playing a good Memphis team. They falter, you might see Boise State or Fresno say, they're the 2 highest because Boise State beat Utah State to get in. So that's going to be really interesting. Yeah, that's an interesting.
Which for those that don't know, do they have to be a certain ranking too in the college football playoff rankings?
It actually might have to be like 12th or better, maybe.
Yeah,
they might have to be high enough. You might. Well, I don't know about that.
So there's a rule that the highest ranked group of 5, so the non-Power 5 conference teams, gets an automatic bid.
Right.
To a New Year's Six bowl. Right. So the 2 of the 6 of the 2 playoff games, the other 4 are the bowls that are playoff. That would be the playoff games in the other years. So I forget what they are this year. I know the Rose Bowl and the Cotton Bowl are not, and I think the Orange Bowl. I'm going to stop myself because I think I might even be wrong. I think the Cotton Bowl might be this year. I know the Rose Bowl isn't because that was Georgia, Oklahoma last year. But yeah, so anyway, looking at this weekend, Matt, we've mentioned these games a lot, but what is the most important game on the slate for you?
So, I mean, I'm not going to pick the obvious one, which is 1 versus 4, right? That's important for everybody. To me,
it's not the most important game though, because I think
I think it's Oklahoma, Texas.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Right. Oklahoma wins, and you would assume they win. They're a 1-loss team. I honestly got to tell you,
they make a huge debate no matter how the SEC championship goes.
Well, first of all, 2-loss Georgia has to be below Oklahoma. And by the way, I was not on the Oklahoma bandwagon. I was not on the Oklahoma bandwagon. They've given up so many points on a consistent basis, like literally physically. I don't understand how you can play defense so poorly. the game was so exciting. But Oklahoma, West Virginia, were they like? What are the defenses doing where it's just so bad? Like, and by the way, I get West Virginia. Oklahoma has superstar NFL defensive players all over the place. Yep. Like what? Like in the NFL right now, what are they doing that offenses in college? I don't like it when it's like the Michigan-Ohio State game. Michigan has multiple first-round draft picks. They have 11 guys. Probably half of them will be on an NFL roster in 3 years, let alone next year. Yep. And yet they got traded for 60 points. Like, what do these defenses do? And I understand.
That's part of why I'm surprised Michigan didn't fall further in the rankings.
Me neither. I got to tell you, I think they deserve to be behind UCF. They're a 2-loss team. And their 2 losses are to the number 3 and number 6 teams in the nation. So maybe you drop them to 8th. I was shocked.
Washington State fell below 4 different 3-loss teams, though.
I know.
So, like,
and by the way,
they're not free to just put to go sort by loss if you're a Power 5 team.
I would tell you this too. I watched the Apple Bowl, whatever.
That was a good game. Yeah, I think it was Apple Cup,
but it was in the snow.
It was in the snow.
If the community watched that game, I understand that Washington won. Great. By the way, Washington, great program. They didn't lose right. So, but they lost to Washington in an absolute snowstorm when their entire game is predicated on spreading the field and throwing the ball. I'm not shocked. And so,
no. As soon as you saw the weather, you thought, all right, these guys are screwed.
So I'm not sure. I mean, that's literally exactly what I thought. I'm not sure they deserve to be below Florida and LSU and Penn State and Washington. I guess you have to put them below Washington, but then again, they only have 2 losses. So I thought it was a little unfair to Washington State. And I think the hard part is LSU didn't help its case. They lost. So it is kind of tough, though, that all these other programs have 3 losses and Michigan only has 2. But it was just such a drubbing. It's just so bad. They're probably going to end up in a New Year's Six Bowl anyway. They're a big name, but
Washington State?
No, Michigan in this case.
Yeah, Michigan absolutely will.
Yeah,
Michigan, you would assume, because they don't do it anymore, like how they did in the BCS era, where the runner-up would go in the previously slotted champion spot for a game. So in the Big Ten's case for the Rose Bowl, I don't know if Northwestern, if they lose to Ohio State, if they automatically get the Rose Bowl. I think Michigan could possibly get it.
Yeah, because it's hard for me to say they deserve it.
Yeah.
I'm struggling because I want to be a Michigan guy because I am. Guys, obviously we've been friends for long enough. But I was just so embarrassing to watch that game. And Michigan is not a program that settles for New Year's Six Bowls. But anyway, I digress. I don't want to go any farther with that. I'm sorry to bring it up, but I'm with you. Oklahoma, Texas is the biggest game on the slate. I think Oklahoma wins that.
Yeah, I would think the same thing. I think they win that.
Okay. I'm assuming we think Clemson beats Pitt.
Yeah, I think this is going to be a pretty chalky weekend. I don't think we're going to see a lot of, aside from the SEC championship, I don't think we're going to see a lot of potential for upsets.
Let's walk through some of the games. So the first game, by the way, 8:00 at night, earlier than normal.
On Friday.
Yep, is Washington and Utah in the Pac-12 game, the Pac-12 championship. Who do you like here?
I'm going to go with Washington just because I think their offense is a little more complete. They have Jake Browning at quarterback, who's been he's just the last 2 years since their playoff appearance 2 years ago, really kind of gone under the radar. I mean, I know this year he hasn't thrown for 3,000 yards, only 16 TDs, but he is a guy, Aaron Fuller, pretty solid wide receiver out there. I just think their offense.
Gaskins has got 4 seasons, 1,000 yards every season. Great running back. Running back. Yep. By the way,
very good point.
This is a rematch. So are you going Washington then, right?
I'm going to pick Washington. Yeah, neutral site. I gotta go with us.
Week 3 of the season, Washington beat Utah at Utah 21-7.
Yep.
Very low scoring college game. I like Utah quite a bit in this game. They are a solid program. I am taking Utah here to upset Washington in the Pac-12 championship game. Good for the Utes. It's a great win for that program because I think they're perpetually underrated, 9-3. And their losses are to really good teams. So I'm taking Utah. I have a feeling. Hey, Friday night spooks,
Hey, not a bad call. Yep, not a bad call.
All right, let's go to the next. Let's get to the big dogs in a little bit. Do you like, by the way, Iowa State and Drake?
Is that a makeup game?
Yeah, it's a makeup game.
Yeah.
I was so confused at first. I think Iowa State wins, by the way.
Yeah. It's kind of funny because Drake was 7-3 and must not have made the FCS playoffs. So they're like, yeah, we might as well play a game. Like,
yeah, I know. It's so weird. I don't understand. But anyway,
it's supposed to be shitty weather in Ames, Iowa. Anyway, it looks like.
Let's jump to my next favorite one. I think this is, if I could find it, Memphis and UCF, 3:30 Saturday. UCF, do they win without Milton?
I'm not sure if they do. Sadly,
I'm not sure they do. But they got
Memphis
a lot of
is pretty solid.
I know.
I mean, Paxton Lynch 2.0. It looks like, and Brady White. He can really huck it. They got Darrell Henderson, solid running back with he's a yard shy of 1,700 on the season, and then they have DeMonte Coxey, who has over 1,000 yards receiving. I think it's going to be tough for UCF to keep track, and I think unfortunately their undefeated season goes by the wayside.
Yeah, very tough there, Brave. I'm with you there too, though. I like Memphis to upset UCF there, which is a shame. They are a great program, but then again, it gets rid of that whole national championship garbage. So yeah, do you like? We already said Clemson's a lock. Do you like Fresno State or Boise State?
Is it actually a home game for Boise State?
I think it is because it's in Boise. I mean, it's basically a home game.
Albertson Stadium is what's throwing me off, but I don't think they have.
I think that might be their stadium.
Yeah,
I'm doing some research. Give me a second. But
let me know. I'm going to go with Boise State just because, I think both teams can really put up points. They both are 10-win teams. I don't know. I do like the Broncos here. Just partially, they're at home. It looks like their defense.
Albertsons is their home. It's on the Smurf turf. Yeah.
Okay, it's on the Smurf turf. Yeah, so I like them at home. Their defense isn't as solid as Fresno State's. Fresno State only let up 162 points this year.
Good defense.
But their offense at home, you got to think that they're going to be buzzing.
Yeah, I like Brett. We talked about Brett Ripon a little bit. He's a potential fly under the radar for pro prospect there. No, I definitely like that. Let's go to Northwestern Ohio State.
I'm going to go with Ohio State here. I'd love to see.
Me too, but I'm going to have to agree.
Pull something off.
Yeah,
like a Penn State 2 years ago, but this isn't that Penn State team. They don't have Saquon Barkley and Trace McSorley in the backfield.
Well, Northwestern can't get into a shootout. They get into a shootout, they're dead. And Haskins has been incredible. Definitely probably going – I think he's going to New York. I don't think he wins it. I think Tua or Murray wins it. But I think he's going to New York, 42 touchdowns. They've got a really good running game. They've got a lot of weapons on the outside. Unless Pat Fitzgerald's team can keep it close with a
they'd have
slugfest.
To grind out the Buckeyes.
Now, by the way, I see it. Oh, this is – you know what? No, I was going to say it's going to rain, but this is in Lucas Oil, so it's in a dome. Damn.
In a dome.
All right, that definitely hurts. Because if it was raining –
I'm guessing you're on ESPN as well. Why does it show the weather for dome stadiums?
It throws us off. We've done this before. I'm with you there. No, I'm with you there. So there's two big games left. We'll go with the most
important. Do we need to talk about the ACC?
No,
I think there's any shot Pitt pulls it out.
Clemson. Locked up.
Yeah.
Locked up.
All right.
Texas, Oklahoma. A rematch. Oklahoma's a 7.5-point favorite, by the way.
Yep.
A lot of bad blood between these guys, too.
Yep.
Do you think Texas can do anything? I mean, do you think they can do anything with this?
So, I mean, if you asked me before the first game, I thought Oklahoma was going to win by like 2 touchdowns. But they really proved it because Oklahoma likes to get into shootouts, and we didn't think that Texas could get into shootouts.
And compete, right.
And compete, yeah. And they proved the haters wrong there.
Right.
I mean, I do think, though, that Oklahoma doesn't have as terrible of a start as they did against Texas back in October.
Okay.
So I am going to go with Oklahoma here. I think Texas can keep pace to a certain degree, probably a touchdown behind throughout the game, and then Oklahoma either pulls it away late. That 7.5 to cover is tough. I do like 77.5 for the over-under. I think that's a good number.
Yeah.
Especially from what we saw from Oklahoma. I don't think that's
Right.
an overreaction by Vegas there.
No. I will tell you this. Lil Jordan Hamilton is a pretty good wide receiver for Texas. Great name. Pretty good wide receiver. He's no Hollywood Brown.
No.
And, by the way, if you don't know, Marquise Brown, Hollywood Brown, is the cousin of Antonio Brown, who was at the West Virginia game. Yes, he is. Antonio Brown was at the West Virginia game. I think Oklahoma gets it done, and I think it puts them in the playoffs.
Yeah, I think so too.
I think they're in the playoffs as well. There's not even going to be a debate. I think Alabama. I know how good Georgia is. Georgia is a really good football team. They're a complete. No one's talking about them because of Alabama dominating the headlines. LSU's had some more exciting games. Kentucky's a cool story. Georgia's a hell of a football team. I just don't see Alabama with a healthy Tua now. I don't see them losing. I have them winning, and you've got one hell of a blue blood college football playoff coming up.
Oh yeah.
Do you think? I mean, does Georgia have a chance? Absolutely, they're that good. Do you think they will win?
I don't think they win. I think they might be able to keep it close.
Okay. But
I mean, we've seen DeAndre Swift, this year, and can he really get it going against this Alabama team that, I mean, stifles teams that look like they should be able to really get something going? Mm-hmm. Teams that start on the ground and get it moving. I mean, I really don't think that this Georgia team figures it out, sadly. I think Alabama is I think they might decimate them. I think it might be. I don't think it's going to be pretty. I'd love to be wrong. I'd love to see Georgia make this close and make the end of that game exciting.
Definitely. Yeah, I want to challenge. I'm with you there. I get you.
We say this every year going to the SEC championship game. We talk ourselves into teams that are ranked 12th, that they have a shot at taking Saban down, and they never do.
Right.
They never do.
This is the best offensive team that Nick Saban has ever had. And I think the positive if you want to learn about how good they are, get ready to listen in on this game when you see them in the playoffs, because you're going to learn about 4 NFL caliber wide receivers, 3 NFL caliber running backs, a bevy of offensive linemen who are going to be drafted in the NFL, and the best starting quarterback in college and best backup quarterback in college in Jalen Hurts. This team is loaded, and I think they show it here against Georgia. I'm with you there. Unless somehow Jake Fromm, who I really am still high on, even though he doesn't get a lot of press, unless he figures it out and they let him sling it, I don't think they stand a chance against Tua.
No.
Who, by the way, and I will talk about this again, I'm salivating to hear Scouts' takes on Tua because he's not draftable this year. He gets a whole nother year in college next year. Can't wait to hear what they're saying about the soon-to-be junior. He's a fascinating prospect. But I digress. So we both have the same playoff then.
All right, so let's look at the slate of New Year's Six Bowls and see if we can try to predict these. I'm going to go in order that these games are going to be played. So the first game is not a playoff game. It is the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl, not a playoff game. So I don't think it has any conference ties that you need to worry about. I think the only ones that do are the Rose Bowl, which is traditionally Big Ten, Pac-10, the Sugar Bowl, which usually is an SEC team, and I believe the Fiesta Bowl likes to have a Big 12 team, but I don't think that's official.
Okay.
So who would you put in the Peach Bowl?
Peach Bowl.
Well, or do you want to start with the playoff teams and then go to the?
I know the playoff teams. I think it's gonna be Alabama versus Oklahoma and Clemson versus Notre Dame. So I can take those out. Cotton is Alabama. Oklahoma, is that what you have as well?
Yeah, because it's closer to Alabama.
Right. And then orange is Clemson, Notre Dame. So we can take those out, right? Okay. So the Peach Bowl, I'm looking at the rankings here.
Yeah, that's sort of where this gets fun is trying to distill down the rankings.
We're assuming UCF loses. So I'm going to assume, I think the Fiesta Bowl gets them this year, right? Gets the non-Power 5, right?
I think so.
Okay. So I'm going to assume it's going to be somebody versus Boise State.
Okay.
That's my assumption, right? Okay. And the Rose Bowl is going to go to Ohio State because they're going to win, which you've already determined, right? Okay. Yep. And I think it's going to be Ohio State versus Utah.
Yeah. So for me, it'd be Ohio State versus Washington.
Washington. Okay, gotcha.
That's Big Ten,
Pac-10. So the Sugar Bowl is going to be Big 12, right? And then
I think it's normally SEC, isn't it?
SEC. Okay. So I guess the question is who finished.
Would it be Georgia?
Well, yeah, I guess it would be Georgia then. And I think because of Georgia's loss, it pushes LSU out and puts Florida, because Florida's ranked higher in, right? Yeah. Okay.
So Florida would play in the Peach Bowl.
So yeah, so the Sugar Bowl would be Ellis would be all right. So it would be Georgia, right? Versus, does it have to be Oklahoma's in? Does it have to be a Big 12 team or no?
No, it does not. They do not have the restriction of having if your champion or your representative is in the playoff, it does not have to be that.
Well,
team.
here's who picks. Okay, Sugar. Here's my question: is the Sugar Bowl or the Peach Bowl picked first?
That I'm not sure of.
No. It's the Peach. The Sugar. The Sugar is picked first. Ooh. I'm going to tell you that. I think Michigan plays in the Fiesta Bowl against Boise State.
Okay.
Right. And no. Let me see. No, it is. No, I just read it. I just looked it up. The Sugar Bowl has to be Big 12 SEC.
Really? Okay.
Yes. Which
even if the SEC champions in the playoff?
Yes, which I think means West Virginia, because Texas loses.
Oh, wow.
West Virginia goes. Right? That makes sense. So it's West. So it's West
I'm reading
Virginia
this too. Yeah.
Versus Georgia in the Sugar Bowl, right? That makes sense to us.
Yeah. The verbiage is when the conference champion is unavailable, the Bulls invite the next best team from that cotton. The cotton or the conference, the Cotton Fiesta and Peach Bowls have no conference tie-ins. As such, the best team from a group of tie ends up in one of those bowls if it doesn't end up as a playoff game.
Yeah. So to me, so I'm going to go through them again. College football, Cotton, Alabama versus Oklahoma. Orange Bowl, Clemson versus Notre Dame. All right.
With both of those.
And I have Rose Bowl being Ohio State. I have it versus Utah. You have it versus Washington. That's okay. And then we have the All-State Sugar Bowl, which has to have a Pac-12, a Big 12, and an SEC game. So it would be Georgia versus West Virginia, we think.
So when they say next best, is that the runner-up?
But sometimes it's just choose. So if it's just a choice, they'd probably take Texas because it has a bigger following than West Virginia. But I think West Virginia gets. I'm going to take West Virginia. I think I'm going to read it that way.
Would the other team? So let me ask you this: and this is what I wanted to get after is does the loser of the Pac-12 champion, in my case Utah, in your case Washington, and does that other team of not Texas or West Virginia get into a New Year's Six bowl game?
Wait.
So you have Utah in the Rose Bowl. Washington is the next best Pac-12 team. Do they get into a New Year's Six game?
I don't, and here's why. I think another team's going to jump them, and that's a team that we haven't talked a lot about, and that's Penn State.
You think Penn State gets in? I
think Penn State plays. I think Penn State plays. First of all, they're a huge draw. They're a massive draw. They're a very good football team, and they're a huge draw. And I think they get in. In this case, I think they slip them into the Peach Bowl. I like LSU Penn State in the Peach Bowl, but I think because LSU's ranked behind Florida, they might take Florida and dump them in the Peach Bowl. So the Sugar is Oklahoma, Georgia.
Not bad.
And then we get Michigan, Boise State. You get Ohio State, Utah for me, and then the Peach Bowl is Penn State versus Florida. I would rather see LSU personally, just my personal opinion.
I would,
but I think it's Florida. They're gonna do. Look, we talked about the Pac-12, right? They've struggled all year with relevancy. They're going to struggle again. Washington is a huge time program. I don't think it works. I think
reasoning for me bringing this up and completing this exercise was that was a big tell last year with the Pac-12 was that Washington and USC both got in, but comparatively to the other conferences, they did not get as many other teams in. You had the SEC with a cornucopia of schools that got in. The Big Ten had 3.
Yeah.
The Pac-12 had Washington in against Penn State in the Fiesta Bowl, but I mean, USC thought they could get in. They played in the Cotton Bowl in a Big 12 Pac-12 game. I don't know. I wanted to run through that exercise of
it's fascinating
because I think these games show that and kind of show, maybe it's a little bit of we want to show we were correct in this. Last question I have for you before we wrap up college. For the first time that the playoff games aren't the Rose Bowl and the Sugar Bowl, which both times it's been that they've been played on January 1st. Every other time it's not been those two games. The semifinals have been played on New Year's Eve. The first time it happened was in 2015, which New Year's Eve was a Thursday. The second time it happened, New Year's Eve in 2016, was on a Saturday. This year, they are not playing the semifinal games on New Year's Eve. New Year's Eve is a Monday, and there is not Monday Night Football because that would be Week 17 in the NFL.
Okay.
But they are playing it on Saturday night, December 29th. Do you think, because they've struggled to get ratings on New Year's Eve, do you think this is the right call for college football?
100%. I could not agree with this more. New Year's Eve is, young people are out. Old people are even out. I was a bummer for me. Well, we were out. The two of us were out together one year, and we couldn't even watch the game. It was like, why? Like, we were trying to watch it, but what do you want me to do? So great move.
Stupid.
Great move here by college to push it back. Give it its due. I want to watch these games, but don't make me choose. So here's the thing. We were on our phones the whole time checking anyway. Let me watch it on the 29th. It'll get your ratings up. I think it's a home run. It's T-ball. It's T-ball. It's so easy, in my opinion. And these games are shaping up to be outstanding.
Oh yeah.
Matchups. There's no
absolutely.
By the way, there's two things we didn't touch on. One, I don't know how this works, by the way. But there's a team that's ranked in the AP that's not ranked in the college football playoff, and that is Army.
Well, they don't play the Army-Navy game the next week.
I know. So my question is, but here's my question. If a couple of these teams ranked now lose, like if Fresno State and Boise State, one of them is going to drop out of the rankings, right?
Yeah, I think
Northwestern might drop out of the rankings. Do you think
what happens with Army?
Love to see it.
I think if they were 9-1 right now, and they're not playing this weekend, and they're not in a conference, so we don't get that. We would not have gotten them this weekend. You would with Navy if they were in this position. I think we had this. I think 3 years ago, we had the possibility. What if Navy won the American and then goes on to beat Army and is 12 and I think they would have been 12-1. Not close. It would have been a UCF situation where they're not undefeated. The reverse of it because they weren't undefeated, so they wouldn't be a playoff contender. But because at the time that they picked the New Year's Six Bowls, does Navy become this sort of flex in, flex out game? I don't know. I don't know if that's something.
By the way,
they pick all the other bowl games Sunday afternoon after they pick the New Year's Six.
This is why I brought this up. You say they have 2 losses.
Yeah.
They lost to Duke to start the year. They got blown out. 34-14. I honestly would tell you that their next loss, should be counted as a win by the committee. They lost 28-21 to Oklahoma.
Yep.
That is the best loss.
In overtime.
Best loss maybe all year by a team. They 100%, in my opinion, should be ranked right now in the BCS. In the college football playoff. And I honestly hope the committee finds a way to get them in at 25. This is a high-quality Army team right here.
Hopefully.
This team can flat-out play. And looking at their losses and their wins, by the way, because there's not a lot of close wins. Like, they hammered a lot of opponents this year. There's a couple. But there's not. I mean, this is a good Army team. I hope they find a way. I hope they sneak in.
You think that they're right on the cusp, and I hope so too.
Yeah.
That's a really good call. We can talk about that more next week because we'd see if they're in it.
A little preview there. By the way, one more thing you didn't bring up because we missed the pod. All we got to say is Lehigh took care of their business and hammered Lafayette. I loved it. It was awesome.
And Patriot League winner Colgate hosts James Madison this weekend. Colgate not only got a seed, or not only got a bye, but they got seeded in the FCS playoffs, which is big for the Patriot League. So good for Colgate.
Definitely did. Awesome.
Yeah.
It's going to be a great college football weekend, heading right into a heavy bowl season. And obviously, we'll be previewing that preview here. By the way, that preview brought to you by Schneckbook. Right? Yes. You want to get some sports betting in, hit up Schneckbook. He will take most of your money anyway, but you might win $1 or two.
Our friend Logan, his newest venture, he gave us a discount code. It is Ravaged in all capital letters. It entitles you to a discounted bookie fee of only 75%. Logan normally charges I believe 95% bookie fee, but that is a minimum bet of $1,000. And Matt, he's giving you a really good deal there because Logan normally has the right to retain 100% of your winnings. And now at least there's more winnings and it's when he chooses. So now you at least have more fees or less fees. So you have more winnings that he might choose not to hold against you.
Correct. And so, look forward to that preview. We'll be here with you. And if you need to further contact Logan, you let us know. We'll get you his address, phone number, and any other piece of information you need to get to your
pitchforks.
Right, your highly illegal bookie. Jordy, excited for college.
Excited for college. We're running out of time because I have to go play softball playoffs on November 29th. Wanted to just quickly touch on the pros. The Eagles, very much still in it. Great win over the Great win this weekend. I don't have story time available right now because I'm literally running out of time. Me biking home from the Eagles. So, Matt, remind me to tell you that story.
We'll tell it next week. I can't wait. Let's get on it. I love it.
A little teaser. By the way, Eagles do play the Redskins on Monday Night Football.
Right. Tune in tonight. Saints versus Dallas. The Dallas loss is crippling. Saints don't need the win, but it's a showcase game for them. And there's a ton of really win or else games going on this week. You talk about Green Bay desperately needing a victory. Carolina needs one. Indianapolis trying to stay pace here. We talked about the Eagles needing a victory as well. A lot of good games. And by the way, a great Sunday night game. Los Angeles Chargers going to visit Pittsburgh. A lot of star power on the field there. So
huge,
ton of good games. Yeah, and I wanted to say in terms of, I guess you could say, quote unquote, storylines, the big one to me right now, and I keep monitoring, is this Green Bay situation. As they continue to falter, does Mike McCarthy keep his job? It's fascinating. So tune in. Arizona should be an easy win.
Yes.
But this team has really struggled with some bad losses, and they are on a really bad skid right now. So we'll see what happens if they can right the ship.
Yep. Hopefully we can get a blog up, one of us, because we're going to be together over the weekend. So one of us hopefully can get something. But keep an eye out for it.
Yeah, and we'll catch up. We'll catch up heavy next week on the NFL, my friend.
Yeah, this week, because there's so many scenarios, we wanted to focus on college. So thank you so much for listening. And our quick Week 13 preview in the NFL. I know that was a part of the title, but we do appreciate it. There's just a ton to talk about, as you might imagine. And if you were listening to this after the playoffs rankings came out, it's probably a ton of fun because we're probably wrong to a certain degree, or maybe there was some upset. Who knows? But Matt, thank you.
Thank you.
What do you got?
I said, I hope there is an upset. I love chaos.
Oh, yeah, it'll be a ton of fun. But Matt, thank you as always. That is going to do it for us. Let us know what you think in the comments. Make sure you go to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. The Bullpen Cart feed on iTunes. That's what you search, the Bullpen Cart. Greg Piatelli and I dropped a new pod on the feed, Blue Line Icing, our hockey podcast. So make sure you check that out if you are an NHL fan. But, Matty D, for you and for myself, Jordy Cannell, that's going to do it for this week's episode of the Funvee Tailgate. Have a great weekend, everybody, and go Birds.